Drawing, and I am 17 years old and a senior in high school. This is my 9th year in 4-H and my 9th public presentation. I am currently a team leader of the Precious Pollinators 4-H Club. Tonight I'm going to be speaking on a difficult, but I think it's an important topic, and that is the similarities between the Holocaust and abortion. First, I'm going to define each of these topics, and then I'm going to go into some of the similarities between the language and the practice of the two. Two things I want to mention before I start is, number one, I will not be showing any graphic images or describing anything graphically. Both those topics are very hard to handle and very deep, and I will not be doing anything graphically. And second of all, this presentation is not meant to be an attack on anyone who has had an abortion or on anyone's mindsets and views. So let's jump right in. So I'm sure most of you or all of you know what the Holocaust is. According to the Holocaust Encyclopedia, it was the systematic, bureaucratic, state-sponsored persecution and murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and its collaborators. It happened between the years of 1933 and 1945, which were the years of World War II. For the Jews, the distinction really started by being labeled and set apart by being forced to wear the Star of David on their clothes and put it on their businesses. From then, they were moved to ghettos where they were kept in a confined space away from other people, and from then to concentration camps. When you got to the concentration camps, there were two choices. Either you would be sent directly to the gas chambers, or you would be required to do forced labor. And even then, the average lifespan was only 4 months. It didn't matter if you were male or female, old or young, rich or poor. Because they were Jews, they were considered unwanted. And because they were unwanted, they were given the death penalty. So, abortion cannot be put into a timeline because it is a current thing happening and has been happening through most of history. The definition from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary is the termination of a pregnancy after, accompanied by, resulting in, or closely followed by the embryo or fetus. The question of whether or not the unborn baby is a human is widely debated among society, but it is generally scientifically accepted that life begins at conception. Dr. Michelin Matthews Ross, a principal research associate in the Department of Medicine at Harvard Medical School, said, "It is scientifically correct to say that an individual, human life, begins at conception, when egg and sperm join to form the zygote, and this developing human always is a member of our species in all stages of its life." Another quote by Dr. Jaime Gordon, who is a professor of medical genetics and a physician at the Mayo Clinic, is, "I think we can now also say that the question of the beginning of life, when life begins, is no longer a question for theological and philosophical dispute. It is an established scientific fact. Theologians and philosophers may go on to debate the meaning of life or the purpose of life, but it is an established fact that all life, including human life, begins at the moment of conception." Because my presentation is not centered around this debate, I will not be going into the details of why I believe that life begins at conception, and I will be starting this presentation with the a priori that life does begin at conception. If anyone would like to ask questions on this later or discuss it with me later, I would be more than happy to do that. So, abortion, or more specifically induced abortion, is a medical procedure where the baby is killed and then removed from the uterus. There are several methods, and the three most common today are suction, curettage, D&E, or dilation and evacuation, and D&C, dilation and curettage. According to the World Health Organization, between 40 and 50 million babies are killed worldwide each year. Just because the unborn babies aren't wanted, they get the death sentence. Sound familiar? Let's look at some other similarities. Language is a very important aspect of our culture. It shapes how we think and how we view things. Dehumanization, verbally, is an effective tool used by aggressors to lessen the emotional attachment and sympathy for the victim, and is used as a way for the aggressors to justify their actions. It's happened throughout history. It happened in war, it happened with American slavery, it happens in politics today. it was very prominent in the Holocaust and today in abortion. So in 1936, the German Supreme Court decided to state that Jews were not considered persons in the legal sense. In 1973, after the case Roe v. Wade, which legalized abortion in the United States Supreme Court declared that person, as used in the 14th Amendment, did not include the unborn. How dehumanization starts is by attacking the identity of the person. And then, from there, they substitute a whole other identity. In his book Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler said that the Jews were a parasite in the body of other people. Gloria Steinman, an author and feminist leader, said, "A woman would have the right to abortion just as she has a right to remove any parasitic growth from her body." Another word that was used to describe them both is garbage. Referring to the disposing of the bodies of Jews at the Treblinka concentration camp, Christian Wirth, a Gestapo officer, asked, "What should we do with this garbage?" Thousands of bodies of men, women, and children referred to as only garbage. In regard to abortion, Dr. Marty Kalamaki said, "An aborted baby is just garbage, and that's where it ends up." Normally, when I look at people and babies, I don't tend to see garbage. But you can use the words to present a different mindset and influence how people think. Other words that are used to describe both of them include but are not limited to trash, a mass, non-person, subhuman, and animal. Euphemisms are also another heavily used language tactic. I'm sure you've all heard plenty of them, such as saying you are in between jobs instead of unemployed, or someone passed away instead of died, or, for instance, a dog got put to sleep instead of euthanized. In Nazi Germany, euphemisms were used extensively. The process of choosing who got sent to the gas chamber was called selection. The killing of thousands in gassing vans was referred to as evacuation, and the annihilation of the Polish Jews was called the removal of the Jewish element. These words and phrases softened the harsh reality and blinded the public's eyes to what was really going on. The killing of the Jews was not only referred to as not a big deal, but even a humane cause by Nazi officer Dr. Wilhelm Pfannenstiel. Let's compare some of those to abortion euphemisms. The right to decide which babies get aborted or not is called choice. The removal of unborn babies from the environment which supports their life is called evacuating the uterus. In abortion clinics, they are very careful with what they say. Instead of saying kill the baby, they say terminate the pregnancy. And instead of baby, they say fetus. The goal is to remove the emotional attachment and realization of what's going on. So now that I've talked about the language, I want to briefly talk about the practices themselves and some of the statistics. One less known comparison you can make between the two topics is medical experimentation. During the Holocaust, Jews in concentration camps were not only used for forced labor, but also as test subjects for medical means. For example, they test out different ways of mass sterilization, human defects, the altitude pilots could fly out without dying, and the effects disease had on people. Often, the people died in these experiments. They didn't choose to undergo them, but they were forced to anyway. Dr. August Hertz said, "Wouldn't it be ridiculous to execute them and send their bodies to the crematory oven without giving them an opportunity to contribute to the progress of society?" There are cases today where after abortion, the baby's body is taken to have tests performed on it and research as well. Things they research include fetal brain metabolism, how long hearts last, how official placentas affect the baby, and to harvest stem cells. Sometimes the tissue is even used in common medicine. The abortion organizations capitalize on the financial opportunity that aborted fetal tissue brings to the medical community. Similar to Dr. Hertz's proclamation about the Jews, Dr. Lawrence Vaughn said, "We are simply using something destined for the incinerator to benefit mankind." So now I want to look at some of the statistics and numbers between the two. As I mentioned before, throughout the 12 years of the Holocaust, approximately 6 million Jews died. It is estimated that several million more people were killed as well, such as people who were mentally or physically handicapped, homosexuals, gypsies, and Jehovah's Witnesses. That brings the total up to approximately 11 million people dying. And abortion is estimated that between 40 and 50 million babies are killed worldwide each year. If you multiply 40 million times 12, the years of the Holocaust, you come up with the astonishing number of 480 million babies. We have outdone the Holocaust. And the worst part is, it isn't over. We can't look back and say, wow, that was a horrible time in history. This is going on currently. It's not 12 years and then stopped. It has been a problem throughout history, but today in our culture we have grown to accept and embrace the fact that women can choose whether or not to abort their babies. We have bought into the language, the euphemisms, and dehumanization, and many have turned a blind eye to the issue. We gape in horror at school shootings where 20 people die, and I'm not saying those aren't horrible events and those aren't precious lives lost, but it is hypocrisy then to ignore the fact that 125,000 babies are killed daily. Our culture is not informed on what's going on behind the scenes, but ignorance is often our own choice. We don't want to address the topic, and believe me, I know it is a hard topic, but we can fall into a trap of denial. During and after the Holocaust, many people chose not to look at the events and take action, but to deny them and ignore what was going on around them. They denied that Jews were being killed by the thousands in concentration camps, and that the gas chambers even existed. Now, some fall into that same trap of denial. It is much easier to choose to be ignorant, because when you don't know, you have no responsibility to act. I hope this presentation is eye-opening and clear that we can't just sit and do nothing while a second Holocaust happened. As Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German pastor killed for speaking against the Nazis, said, "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act." Thank you for listening, because that in itself is a step away from denial and towards action. To summarize where we've been together, I have talked about the similarities between Holocaust and abortion, the language, specifically euphemisms and dehumanization, and the practices, the numbers and medical experimentation. The Holocaust is in the past, but abortion is a current subject. I would encourage you to dig into the facts, read books and articles, and engage in conversations with your families, your neighbors, and your coworkers. We remember people who survived the Holocaust with awe and respect, people like Corrie ten Boom and Elie Wiesel. We admire the bravery of people who acted to save the lives of those targeted by the Nazis, such as Oskar Schindler, Audrey Hepburn, and Chinyu Suhara. Today, we are amazed by the miracle of abortion survivors such as Gianna Jessen, and can't imagine life without the contributions of people such as Steve Jobs and Tim Tebow, people whose mothers were advised to abort them. As each of us in this room come to be brave and take action, who knows if one of us will be remembered for saving 1, 10, 100, 1,000 lives. Thank you. Are there any questions?